Lydia Marlowe was 32 years old when the call came in at precisely 2:47 p.m. on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday. It sliced through the quiet drone of her sleek office like a sudden gust through a closed window. She had been hunched over acquisition reports, a scarlet pen poised to strike through numbers related to a redevelopment project downtown. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of her corner office in a modest high-rise in Brighton, the London skyline stretched out. Cranes stood like giant, skeletal sentinels guarding the city's ever-changing silhouette. Her phone buzzed, displaying an unfamiliar number. "Hello, this is Victoria Manning from Elegant Affairs Event Planning," said a syrupy voice when she picked up. "I'm calling about the Henderson wedding this Saturday." That name, Henderson, hit Lydia like a punch. It was once hers, her maiden name, the one she had shed 3 years ago when the endless dismissals and condescension from her family had finally become unbearable. Her chest tightened before Victoria could even finish. "Yes," Lydia said, steadying her voice as she laid her pen down on the crisp reports. "I'm sorry to inform you," Victoria continued, her tone shifting from sweetly rehearsed to sharp and clipped, "that you have been uninvited. The family's orders. Your presence would not be welcome." The line went dead. The hum of the office lights buzzed in her ears. Lydia leaned back in her leather chair, eyes fixed on the London skyline. "I understand," she said simply. "Great," Victoria chirped, almost relieved. "Makes this easier. I was told you might cause a scene. Have a nice day." Click. For a long moment, Lydia just stared at the silent phone. Then a laugh broke free, sharp, unguarded, echoing off the glass walls. They had done it. Her own sister, Emma, had wielded the knife, uninviting her from her own sister's wedding. The irony was exquisite. Emma's grand celebration was booked at Marlowe Manor, the city's premier wedding venue, quietly bought 6 months ago by Lydia's company, Marlowe Holdings Limited. She had kept the acquisition under wraps, a secret weapon. Her assistant, David, knocked and poked his head in. "Miss Marlowe, your 3 o'clock is here." "Cancel it," Lydia said, still smiling faintly. "And bring me the file on Marlowe Manor." 20 minutes later, the phone buzzed again. The same number. "Hello, Miss Marlowe?" Victoria's voice was higher now, brittle with panic. "I'm so sorry about earlier. I had no idea you owned the venue. We can't possibly move the wedding now. It's tomorrow, and the Ashworth family is involved. We need to fix this." Lydia let the silence stretch, hearing Victoria's panicked breaths. "Victoria," she said finally, voice cool as the glass desk beneath her hand, "I think we need to talk." Yes, of course. I can come to you or you can come here, whatever you prefer. Please, Miss Marlowe, we want to make this right. I'll be there in an hour." The Marlowe Manor estate sprawled across 12 acres of manicured gardens in Surrey, just a short drive from London's centre. Lydia remembered the first time she walked through the grand gates. The restored Georgian facade, sweeping lawns, and the ballroom that could hold 300 guests under glittering crystal chandeliers. This was a stage of legacy, a place where England's elite sealed their stories. She hadn't bought it for sentimentality. The bookings alone promised millions in revenue. But standing there that afternoon, the irony curled like a smirk across her lips. Emma, the sister who had branded her a family shame, had chosen Lydia's house for her fairy tale. Victoria met her in the marble-floored lobby, wringing her hands nervously. She was younger than Lydia expected, barely 28, with glossy chestnut hair styled in a polished bob, and a designer suit that screamed trying too hard. "Miss Marlowe," she rushed forward. "I cannot apologize enough. Your sister told me you weren't welcome and asked me to handle it quietly. I had no idea you owned the venue." Lydia studied her, noting the nervous flicker in her green eyes. "What exactly did Emma tell you about me?" Victoria hesitated, then whispered. "She said you were the family disappointment, that you left the family business to chase some failed tech startup, and your presence tomorrow would be embarrassing." Lydia laughed, bitter and low. Failed startup? If only they knew. 3 years ago, Lydia had been the star analyst at Henderson Financial Group, her father's investment firm. She'd lived in that office, working 60-hour weeks, her fingerprints on every major deal. But no matter how much revenue she generated, Her older brother Marcus collected the praise. When she pitched ideas, they were dismissed. When Marcus pitched the same ideas, they were hailed as genius. When mistakes happened, they landed on her. The breaking point was the municipal bond deal that earned the firm $12 million in fees. Lydia built the models, structured the financing, carried the weight until her spine bent. Marcus took the bow. When she confronted her father, he dismissed her. "You're being emotional," he said. "Learn from your brother instead of competing," so she left. She took her savings, her contacts, and every ounce of resentment, and built something larger than they could imagine. "Victoria," Lydia said, lowering herself into the leather chair across from the event planner's desk. "Tell me about tomorrow's wedding." Victoria pulled a thick folder into her lap, flipping it open with trembling fingers. 250 guests. Ceremony in the Rose Garden at 4 o'clock. Cocktail hour on the terrace. Reception in the ballroom. The Ashworths spared no expense. This is easily a £150,000 event. And Emma specifically said, "I wasn't welcome?" Victoria nodded. She was very clear. "Under no circumstances is my sister to be anywhere near this wedding. She's already embarrassed us enough, and I won't have her ruining the most important day of my life." A cold clarity settled over Lydia. Not anger. Anger had burned itself out long ago, but something sharper. A decision. "Victoria," Lydia said evenly, "you're going to call Emma. Tell her there's been a problem with the venue. Double booked." Victoria's eyes widened. "But that's not true. And even if it was, there's nowhere else in Surrey that can handle an event this size on such short notice." "I know," Lydia said softly. It took a moment. Then horror spread across Victoria's face. "Miss Marlowe, you can't be serious." Make the call. 15 minutes later, Lydia's phone lit up again. Emma's voice tore through the line, shrill and furious. "What do you mean the venue is double booked? Do you know how much money we've spent? The flowers alone were £12,000. This is a disaster." "Actually," Lydia said calmly, "there's no mistake. Victoria called you because I asked her to." "Wait. What?" "You see, Emma, I own Marlowe Manor. Have for 6 months." Silence thickened the line. "That's impossible," she spat. "You don't have that kind of money. You're barely scraping by on your little tech business." If only she knew. "Check the property records," Lydia said. "Marlowe Holdings Ltd. purchased Marlowe Manor last April." Her breath quickened. "Even if that's true, and I don't believe it, you wouldn't cancel my wedding." "You're not that cruel." "You're right," Lydia murmured. "I'm not cruel. I'm just not interested in hosting events for people who think I'm an embarrassment." "This is insane," Emma snapped. "I'm calling Dad. He'll fix this. Please do." The line went dead. Lydia stared at her reflection in the glass, the city shimmering behind it. For the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted, and this time she wasn't going to flinch. Less than 20 minutes later, Lydia's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Emma's high-pitched fury on the other end. It was her father's voice, deep and commanding, pressing down like a London fog on a damp morning. "Lydia, what on earth is going on?" She leaned back in her chair, the leather cool beneath her fingertips. "Hello, Dad. It's been what? Almost 2 years since we last spoke? How are you? Don't play games with me." His voice crackled with impatience. "Emma's hysterical, claiming you own some wedding venue and that you're threatening to sabotage her wedding. Tell me it isn't true." Lydia tapped the edge of her desk, slow and deliberate. "It's true. I own Marlowe Manor. As the owner, I decide which events we host." Silence. For a heartbeat, she worried he'd hung up. "Then you own Marlowe Manor and other properties?" "How?" His voice was incredulous, the kind of disbelief reserved for hearing a cat bark. "I left Henderson Financial with more than just savings," Lydia said, voice hardening like the polished oak beneath her palm. "I had years of contacts, a deep understanding of the market, and the drive to build something on my own. And most importantly, talent." He inhaled sharply, but she didn't pause. "Remember the Millennium Development Project? The city's £160 million cultural district financing. Marcus deal," he cut in, voice tight at an O, she said flatly. "Mine. I spent 8 months building relationships with the city planning committee, structuring the financing, negotiating contracts. Marcus just signed the papers and smiled for the newsletter photo. That's the difference. She added, "You can't fake that." "And the Patterson Industrial Acquisition?" She pressed, voice low. "That earned Henderson Financial £12 million in fees. That was mine too. I identified Patterson as a target, built the models, pitched the board. Marcus presented my work." The silence on the line thickened, heavy as London fog. "For 3 years," Lydia continued, "I carried your business while Marcus and you took credit. When I asked for recognition, you called me emotional. Said I should learn from him instead of competing." Her father's breath rattled through the receiver. "Even if what you say is true," he said finally, voice tight, "one property doesn't make you a mogul. You couldn't possibly have afforded Marlowe Manor. It's worth at least £7 million." Lydia glanced at the thick folder David had dropped earlier. Marlowe Holdings owned 17 commercial properties across Greater London, combined value roughly £150 million. They held majority stakes in 3 developments breaking ground next year. She let the pause sharpen like a knife. "We've made an offer to acquire the Henderson Financial building." The silence stretched so long she checked the line hadn't dropped. "It hadn't. You're trying to buy our building," he said finally, voice low, strangled. "I heard Henderson Financial is 3 months behind on rent. A beat. What do you want, Lydia?" She leaned forward, her reflection fractured in the glossy black of the phone screen. "Respect. I want Emma to apologize for uninviting me, calling my business a failure, and treating me like I never mattered. I want all of you to stop pretending I'm nothing because I chose to succeed outside your shadow. And if Emma apologizes?" His voice was cautious. "Then she gets her dream wedding at one of the city's most exclusive venues, and we move forward like a family that recognizes me. And if she doesn't—" Lydia turned toward the wide window. The London cityscape spread beneath her like a chessboard of towers and cranes. "The Rose Garden at Marlowe Manor," she said softly, "will be double booked. She'll spend the next 18 hours scrambling for another venue." "This is blackmail," he spat. "No," she corrected. "This is business. Something I learned from you." The line went dead. An hour later, her phone lit up again. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Lydia," her sister's voice was softer, almost fragile. "Mum says I should apologize." A pause. The words scraped at her throat. "What do you think?" "Lydia." Let silence stretch. "I think you should start by telling me what exactly you're apologizing for." Another pause. Then quietly, "For uninviting you, for calling your business a failure, for all of it." Her voice cracked on the last words. "I don't know how to fix this, but I want you at my wedding if you'll still come." Lydia closed her eyes. She could demand more. A public apology, recognition on her own terms, maybe even drag Marcus into the light. But beneath Emma's entitlement and cruelty, she heard something unexpected. "Regret. I'll come," she said finally. "Really?" Relief bloomed in Emma's voice. "Really. But this conversation never happened. As far as anyone knows, I'm just another guest tomorrow. Not the owner. Not the sister you uninvited. Understand?" "Yes," came the softer reply. "Thank you, Lydia. Thank you." When the line clicked off, Lydia stared again at the city skyline, gleaming like glass after rain. But beneath the shine, she felt cracks. Fractures waiting to spread, and in the back of her mind, a thought stirred. Marcus, standing in their father's office, smug smile as he held her financial model. She had been invisible then. Tomorrow she wouldn't be. But visibility came with a price, and Lydia had no illusions that her family, least of all Marcus, would pay it quietly. Morning light filtered through the sheer curtains of Lydia's penthouse in Richmond, soft and pale like a whispered promise. She stood before her wardrobe longer than necessary, fingers brushing fabric until she settled on something elegant but unassuming. A navy silk dress that draped smoothly from one shoulder, the kind of understated sophistication that said, "I'm here, but you won't see me coming." Pearl studs caught the light without demanding attention, and her glossy chestnut hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, simple yet deliberate. Today, she would be part of the room, not the story. Marlowe Manor appeared before her like a waking memory. 12 acres of gardens trimmed to perfection, boxwood hedges punctuated with late-blooming roses. The 1920s facade gleamed creamy against the early morning sky. Valet attendants in crisp black uniforms moved with quiet precision, and staff glided between doors carrying trays of crystal and polished silverware. She knew their names. She trained half of them herself. The vestibule. Anna greeted her with a smile that held secrets. "Ms. Marlowe," she whispered, dimples flashing. "Third row, aisle seat. Everything as requested." "Thank you," Lydia said softly. "If anyone asks, I'm a family friend." Nothing more. Anna's tiny smile was all the confirmation she needed. The rose garden had transformed since Lydia's last visit. White chairs arranged like a soft wave, lantern hooks lining the paths like punctuation marks, blush peonies woven through climbing vines over the pergola. A gentle breeze carried the faintest notes of piano, barely audible but perfect. This was Emma's day, a meticulously crafted stage. Victoria found her near the terrace doors, cheeks flushed with nerves but posture immaculate. "Lydia," she began, caught herself, then corrected with a trembling smile. "Thank you again for your mercy yesterday." "Mercy is a big word," Lydia replied dryly. "I prefer discretion." Victoria laughed nervously, then lowered her voice. "There's something I should tell you. The instruction to uninvite you? That first call was from Emma. But there was a second call the next morning, from a man I didn't recognize. Calm voice. Said it would avoid disruption if you were kept away. He knew the timelines. No name given. Lydia's eyes narrowed. "And you think Marcus made that call?" Victoria glanced over her shoulder. "I'm not sure. But you should be aware." Her gaze followed Victoria's, landing on a shadowed figure standing beneath a chestnut tree. Marcus, tie perfectly knotted, head bent toward his phone, expression unreadable. The old burn of humiliation flared in Lydia's chest, then cooled like water on hot iron. Information was oxygen. Panic was gasoline. She had learned the difference. Inside, the manor moved with the grace of a well-rehearsed ballet. Tall glasses were set and reset, each one a tiny mirror catching flickers of light. The pastry chef, who quietly called her Ms. M when no one was watching, lifted a finger in salute before disappearing into the kitchen. Lydia texted Marcus nothing. She texted Anna. "Check the generator relay for the terrace." A thumbs-up emoji and a timestamp arrived instantly. Habit more than worry. She had built this place to withstand inconvenience. Finding her seat exactly as Anna promised. Third row, aisle, the music swelled subtly. Guests arrived in waves. Women clutching purses like shields. Men adjusting cuffs with the easy confidence of those who never question whether they belong. When her father entered, the room shifted. People didn't say it aloud, but some men bent the air around them like gravity. His gaze swept the crowd, slipping over Lydia like weather, lingering just long enough to register. She lifted her chin a fraction. Not enough to invite, just enough to acknowledge. He looked away first, then to Emma. Emma was a vision, lace and light, the dress a theatrical masterpiece. But her face was honest. Joy carved its own geometry. When her eyes met Lydia's, her mouth softened from shock to something warmer. She broke free from her. Bridesmaids like a girl who still remembered how to run barefoot. "You came," she said, stopping a breath away, bouquet trembling slightly. "Of course," Lydia replied. "You look beautiful." "Lydia," Emma whispered. The name was no longer a weapon. "Thank you for what?" Lydia asked gently. "For letting today be simple." Simple was not the word Lydia would have chosen, but she nodded as if it could be. Emma returned to the procession. The aisle fell quiet, a line of held breaths. The officiant began the ancient cadence that called people into impossible promises. Lydia let the words wash over her. Some landed. Emma's vows were careful, heartfelt. When Bradley replied, his voice steadied on her name. Lydia watched her father watch her sister. His hand clenched once at the back of his chair. Marcus's jaw twitched. A soft wind stirred the garden. Peony petals answered. The kiss was perfect. Picture postcard perfect. Applause rippled like a school of fish. Guests rose. Music brightened. Lydia stayed seated until the aisle cleared. then stood and allowed herself to be carried along the terrace current into cocktail hour. The terrace smelled of rosemary and champagne. Servers passed trays of glossy canapes, each a tiny masterpiece. She was intercepted by a woman in emerald green. A face from a recent planning meeting. Lydia, she said, touching her elbow, we met at the Riverview briefing. You asked the only sensible question in the room. The woman introduced herself as a vice president at a family office specializing in quiet, patient investments. They spoke of floodplains and setbacks, the difference between paper and earth. When the woman handed Lydia her card, she covered the phone number with her thumb and wrote a new one beneath. This is the number I actually answer, she said. Call Wednesday. 2 more conversations found Lydia without effort. A structural engineer who'd read a white paper Lydia had written under an alias. A gallery owner seeking sponsorship for a cultural district annex. Business cards slid into Lydia's clutch like small white boats. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number bloomed on the screen. You always wanted them to see you. For a moment, the terrace tilted. It wasn't the message. It was the tone. Lydia scanned the crowd. Marcus was at the bar, back turned, speaking too close to Victoria. His lips curved in a smile that wasn't quite a smile. Victoria looked pale, cornered, clutching her clipboard like a shield. She typed a single word in reply. Who? The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. Lydia saved the number under a name meaningless to anyone but her. She slid the phone into her clutch. Victoria drifted near, schooled into serenity. The band is ready, she said. We'll move to the ballroom in 10. Anna says the terrace power tested clean. Good, Lydia said. You're doing fine work, Victoria. Her eyes softened with relief. Gratitude does more for people than money can. Thank you, Victoria said, hesitating. For what it's worth, I don't think Emma wanted to hurt you the way it happened. By whom? Lydia asked. Knowing she wouldn't say it, I'm not certain. Victoria replied carefully. But if there's anything you want adjusted tonight, even small things, tell me. Keep the speeches short, Lydia said, and Victoria laughed like someone granted mercy twice. Inside, chandeliers held light like fruit, tables gleamed, place cards aligned like a precise hand of cards. She walked the perimeter like always before the first dance. Guests flowed in soft tides. The band tested a phrase, then turned it into something inevitable. Emma and Bradley entered to the sound a room makes when it agrees. To be happy for a few hours. Victoria glanced at Lydia, then away. Lydia watched her father stand and lift his glass. He chose safe words. Polished anecdotes, carefully measured gratitude. He didn't look at Lydia, which meant he was aware of her in a way he couldn't show. When the music resumed, Lydia stepped onto the side terrace for air. The sky was the blue of an ending or a beginning. Garden lamps blinked on in a slow, staggered bloom. Voices softened behind her. At a footfall. Lydia. She turned. Her father stood in the doorway, expression stripped bare. For the first time in years, they were outside the theater together. Joe, you have a minute? Yes, she said, stepping farther into the night. The terrace was quiet except for cicadas and muffled strings from inside. He leaned against the stone rail, profile caught in amber lantern light. For once, he didn't look like the man who'd built Henderson Financial with ruthless precision. He looked older, tired at the edges. I owe you an apology, he said without ceremony. Lydia blinked, almost laughed at the abruptness. For what, specifically? His jaw tightened. For underestimating you. For letting Marcus take credit when I should have stopped it. For making you feel you had to leave just to prove yourself. The words hit places she thought long scarred. She studied him, waiting for a performance. His eyes were different, shadowed but without arrogance. You suspected Marcus was stealing my deals, she said. Silence. Finally, I did. And you didn't stop him. That I told myself it was character building. He rubbed his temple. That I told myself if you were strong enough, you'd fight harder. That Marcus. He glanced at her. What I really thought was that he deserved it more because he was my son and heir, and you were just my daughter. Someone who would marry, change her name, leave the business. The words landed like stones. At least he wasn't pretending. You made your choice, and I made mine. I built something without you, without Marcus. He turned fully, meeting her eyes. I see that. I didn't want to believe it, but Lydia, you've outbuilt us. She pulled out her phone, flicked to the banking app, and turned the screen toward him. Numbers glowed pale in the night. Marlowe Holdings is worth more than Henderson Financial, more than the Ashworths, more than anyone in that ballroom. His eyes widened. Jesus Christ. How? The same way you built yours, she said. One deal at a time. Except I did it without anyone stealing credit. For a moment, only laughter drifted from the ballroom. He pressed his palms flat against the rail, head lowered. Then, softer than ever, what happens now? She let the question hang. For now, Emma has a beautiful wedding. Tomorrow you'll wake up in a world where your daughter isn't a failure, but a CEO who can choose whether to work with you or not. He studied her long and hard. Finally, he nodded once. Maybe we could talk business. After this. As equals, she let a corner of her mouth lift. That depends on whether you've learned to treat equals. Behind him, movement flickered. Marcus, standing inside the ballroom doors, watching. His gaze sharpened when he saw her phone lit, numbers glowing. His expression unreadable, but his eyes were a brewing storm. He turned before she could say more, swallowed by music and glasses clinking. Her father followed her gaze. He's not going to take this well, he never does. She murmured. They stood in silence as cicadas sang their endless song. She thought of Emma inside, glowing in lace. Of Marcus plotting as always. Of her father, finally stripped of myth, seeing her not as the daughter he dismissed but the rival he never expected. For once, she didn't feel like the family's leftover. She felt like the one holding the lamp. Go back inside, she told him quietly. Dance with your daughter. Let her have this night. Tomorrow, we'll see what's left to talk about. He hesitated, then nodded, turning toward the doors. The amber light caught his silver-threaded hair. He looked like a man carrying a truth too long ignored. When he was gone, Lydia stayed on the terrace, night air cool against her skin. She pulled out her phone. The unknown number glared again. A new message waited. They see you now. But do you see them? Her breath caught. The ballroom's music muffled behind her. A chill ran down her spine. The night had given apologies, tentative respect, fragile reconciliation. But it had also opened a new ledger. One that whispered of secrets buried deep. Lydia slipped the phone into her clutch, squared her shoulders and turned toward the ballroom doors. If Marcus thought she would be easy prey in this game, he'd forgotten one thing. She had learned from the best. By midnight, the ballroom had thinned to a soft murmur of lingering guests. The air was thick with the scent of roses, champagne, and whispered conversations. Silk skirts swept across the marble floors, tuxedo jackets slung over shoulders, laughter folding into the night like a familiar song. Emma and Bradley circled each other at the center, their smiles genuine, their joy unguarded. At least for tonight. Lydia lingered at the edge, unseen yet fully present. Her phone was warm in her hand, the unknown message pulsing in her mind. Asterisk, they see you now. But do you see them? Asterisk across the room. Marcus remained near the bar, glass in hand, expression unreadable. The message might as well have been his voice, woven with quiet menace. Her father's voice broke the silence beside her. Lydia. He stood close, the sharp lines of his face softened by the low light and fatigue. He had shed his jacket. His tie hung loose around his neck. I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about respect, about what happens now. She said nothing, letting him gather his thoughts. Henderson Financial isn't what it used to be. You were right about the Ashworths. Cash flow is strained. The market has changed, but our methods haven't. He met her gaze steadily. You've built something stronger than I thought possible. Bigger, smarter. I'd be a fool not to admit it. A part of Lydia wanted to savor the confession. Another wanted to laugh at the bitter irony that her empire eclipsing his was what finally made him see her. Instead, she stayed still. What are you asking? She finally said. A partnership, he said carefully. Henderson Financial and Marlowe Holdings. Projects, developments, maybe even merging names. But only if you want it. As equals. She searched his face. The arrogance hadn't vanished, but something had shifted. Desperation perhaps, or respect tempered by time. I'd be willing, she said at last. But on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. That you understand I'm not the daughter seeking your approval anymore. I am the CEO of Marlowe Holdings. We work together because the numbers make sense. Not because of blood. He exhaled a reluctant breath. Understood. For a moment, they stood side by side, silent, the city lights flickering beyond the gardens. She wondered if this was what reconciliation felt like. Not warmth, not softness, but a contract written in honesty. Inside, applause erupted. Emma stepped onto the small stage, microphone trembling in hand. She thanked the guests, voice soft but steady, eyes glowing toward Bradley. Her gaze flicked briefly to Lydia. Gratitude passed across her face like a secret shadow. Later, near the cloakroom, Emma found Lydia alone. Her gown trailed behind her, lace catching the light, exhaustion and exhilaration mixed in her eyes. "Lydia," she said, reaching for her hand, "I don't know how to say this without sounding small, but thank you for everything. For not letting me ruin us completely." "You didn't ruin anything," Lydia said quietly. "You learned that's enough." Emma bit her lip, eyes glossy. "I'll never forget what you did tonight, and I'll never forgive myself for what I said before." Lydia placed a steady hand on her sister's shoulder. "Tonight wasn't about me. It was about you and Bradley. Remember that." Emma blinked quickly, then surprised her by squeezing her hand. Real, like the sisters they once were before the world made them rivals. As the last guests filtered out, only family and staff remained. Marcus approached as if waiting for his moment. "Well," he drawled, voice low and mocking, "that was quite the show. You must be proud." Lydia turned slowly to face him. "Proud of Emma?" "Yes." His laugh was quiet, sharp. "Don't play modest. You orchestrated half this night whether anyone knows it or not. Power outage resolved too neatly. Speeches suspiciously short. Classic Lydia, moving pieces, never admitting you're the one at the board." "And you?" she asked. "Always in the wings, pulling strings, hoping no one sees." His eyes glittered hard. "Careful. Some of us know things that could complicate your little empire." The words hung heavy. "What are you threatening, Marcus?" His smirk was a razor's edge. "Nothing yet." Before she could respond, he slipped back into the shadows near the coat racks, leaving unease in his wake. Lydia walked to the terrace one last time, needing air. The gardens were nearly dark, lanterns burning low, petals bruised by the night breeze. Her phone buzzed again. The same unknown number. Asterisk, "You're not the only one who knows where the bodies are." Asterisk, she stared at the screen, pulse steady but deep. Somewhere in this family, in this city, someone else had begun to speak in riddles, and Lydia had a sinking suspicion Marcus wasn't bluffing. The night had brought apologies, respect, and fragile peace. But it had also opened a ledger of secrets waiting to be uncovered. She slipped the phone into her clutch, squared her shoulders, and turned back toward the manor. If Marcus thought she'd be easy prey in this new game, he'd forgotten one thing. She had learned from the best. The grand ballroom was nearly empty now, the last of the guests drifting away like autumn leaves on a soft breeze. The air smelled faintly of wilted roses and lingering champagne sweetness. Staff moved quietly, folding linens, stacking chairs, whisking away remnants of celebration. The polished floors caught the last gleam of the chandeliers, casting fractured light like scattered stars. Lydia lingered, her hand trailing along the carved oak banister. Each curve, each smooth surface whispered the truth she had carved with relentless will. Not a gift from family fortune, but an empire built from grit and defiance. Outside, the valet area was hushed under the moonlight. Her driver opened the car door, but she hesitated, eyes drawn back to the glowing windows of Marlowe Manor. The echo of Emma's hug lingered, a surprising weight she hadn't expected. She had gone to war with her sister and come away not as victor or victim, but as something else entirely. An equal finally seen. The city skyline stretched beyond, skyscrapers standing like silent sentinels against the dark sky. She slid into the leather seat, the soft click of the door closing a quiet punctuation. Her phone buzzed once more. The same unknown number. Asterisk, "They'll come to you now. But not all come with love." Asterisk, she exhaled slowly, the tension coiling deep inside. Whoever sat behind that number wasn't guessing. They knew Marcus was the obvious suspect, But these words felt older, measured. Someone who had watched longer than they'd admitted at a home. Her penthouse wrapped around her like glass and steel, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the black water of the Thames, broken by the scattered lights along the shore. She kicked off her heels, dropped her clutch on the marble counter, and poured a glass of water. The apartment hummed in its quiet familiarity. Yet for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. She felt watched. Opening her laptop, fingers moved through muscle memory. Property dashboards lit the screen, occupancy rates, lease renewals, development milestones. Numbers steadied her like prayer point 17 commercial properties. 3 developments breaking ground. And glowing bold in her private files, the offer placed on Henderson Financial's headquarters. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. She drafted an email addressed to her father and Emma. Subject: terms. The body was spare, clinical. Asterisk: I'm open to future collaboration, but only on equal footing under binding agreements. No more shadows. No more theft. If you're interested, respond by Monday. If not, the offer lapses. Asterisk: her thumb hovered over send. Demanding terms from your own blood was a different kind of violence. Quieter, deeper. Finally, she pressed down, the message flew. She stared at the empty inbox, the silence pressing close. A tone chimed moments later. Another text from the unknown number. Asterisk: good. Now the real game begins. Asterisk: a slow smile tugged at the corner of her mouth despite the knot of tension. They wanted a game that they'd forgotten she'd been playing for years. The Thames reflected the first pale edges of dawn. Ink spreading softly across water. Lydia stood by the glass, arms crossed, breathing in the new day. For 3 years, she'd been the daughter dismissed, the sister erased, the failure exiled. Tonight, they had seen her. Not because she begged or proved herself, but because the empire she built left them no choice. Revenge had never been the goal. Respect was, and now, respect was hers. But as the city awoke beneath her, she knew the story wasn't finished. Marcus' stormy gaze in the ballroom. The anonymous texts. The truths buried beneath decades of Henderson polish. All waited, restless. Like cracks in glass that only needed one tap to shatter. She raised her glass of water toward the horizon. A private toast to what was coming. Tomorrow, they would call her CEO, partner, equal. But tonight she was something sharper. The woman they never saw.